has a double master's degree, and he's an international preacher, an international speaker. So parents and all stakeholders who are here today, we want to appreciate that disability is not inability, and we can do so much for our children. We can actually ensure they get the right quality education and move forward as children who can make a difference in this country. I really won't take long because I would summarize what is on the sector policy for learners and trainees with disabilities, because that's the key and that's the latest from the government. Sector policy for learners and trainees with disabilities 2018, May 2018, and you know the president is very passionate about special needs and disabilities. He launched that in KICD in May 2018, and now it's now the legal requirement that is driving this country forward in terms of disability. It has got a number of chapters. You may have this to after the presentation so that we don't really dwell much. It has got introduction, it has got contextual analysis, types of disabilities. It has inclusive education. Remember, we're now journeying from segregation to integration to mainstreaming, then moving to inclusive education. We are not yet there, but there's a journey to inclusivity. And we're talking about, as a country, we have ratified a number of policies and legislations from the international arena, and as a country, we need to move forward in terms of inclusivity. There is themes, objectives, policy statements, and strategies. There is institutional implementation framework for the sector policy. Basically, the government has done a lot in terms of, this is a revision of the 2009 special needs policy that the government has reviewed and has produced the current one. Then what is the mission of this policy? An inclusive and equitable quality education opportunity for all sustainable development. That's the vision for the policy. It has got the mission to provide a conducive environment in which the potential of all learners. Remember, our CBC talks about the mission that to bring out the potentials in the child. Every child has the potential. Don't look at the negativity. Don't begin saying, whoa, what can this one do? Or he can't do anything. The negative statements, he can't do this one, she can't do this one, he can't do this one. Let's begin having the positive attitude that what can the child be able to do? The policy goal is to provide a robust sector policy framework for provision of education and training for learners and trainees with disabilities. Now we're not talking about children anymore, we're talking about learners and trainees with disabilities. Again, we're saying that persons with disabilities, especially children, face a lot of problems as a result of their special needs. Remember, if you are able to face problems when you are normal, how much more do our children with special needs face problems, challenges? Nobody wants to teach them. Nobody wants to associate with them. Nobody wants to give them services. But the government has come up with a mechanism and a policy to ensure that those children are not left behind. And the government of Kenya is committed to the provision of inclusive, relevant, and equitable quality education and training opportunities to all its citizens, including those with disabilities. As we move forward as a country, in the 21st century, we're not leaving anybody behind. We're moving forward as a team. And we're saying that the government of Kenya is committed to the full realization of education as a basic human right for all children, as reaffirmed in the Constitution of Kenya 2010, Article 54B, gives specific rights to persons with disability to access education institutions and facilities that are integrated into a society and compatible with the interests of the person. Don't force me to eat your meal. Let me eat my meal. Let me do what I'm able to do. If I'm able to charge phones and repair phones, That is my strength. Work with me from my strength aspect. And then the government of Kenya recognizes the importance of special needs education as a crucial subsector and attainment for education for sustainable development goal number 4. Again, moving forward, we cannot achieve that if the government doesn't recognize that. The government has done its part. And the government therefore intends to ensure that learners with disabilities are enabled to transit from early childhood to primary, to secondary, to tertiary, and universities. So we are not going to leave any child behind under this policy. The policy aligns the provision of education and training to the Constitution of Kenya 2010, to the Basic Education Act 2013, as well as Sustainable Development Goal number 4 on equitable, inclusive, quality education and lifelong learning. Then the policy is the culmination of the review that was, as I talked about, of the sector, the special needs policy of 2009. So this culminates into that. Therefore, it has brought out so many good things for the country and for all stakeholders in the education sector and even in special needs education. The policy has been developed with an overall goal of promoting the provision of education and training for learners and trainees with disabilities. The pursuit of this goal has necessitated the several, of course, critical shifts from the 2009 special needs education policy. Inclusive education is now the overarching principle of the entire policy. That's why even when you are building, you are putting up your classrooms, putting up the structures, we want to ensure that the structures are disability friendly to the persons on the wheelchair. Are your doors wide enough? Are there toilets for persons with special disabilities to get in? Or when we go to the meetings, are we discussing issues of disability? Or we say, any OB, then there's an issue of special needs education. No, we're talking about special needs and disability must be part of the agenda of discussion. It's no longer an A or B. It has to come right in the agenda we're discussing about. If you are making the field, is the environment friendly for our children? If you are doing admissions, are you admitting children with special needs and disabilities in your school? Or you are discriminating? Or we don't need you here. You don't belong here. Where does that child belong? He belongs to Kenya. Therefore, the policy recognizes all disabilities and special needs and prioritizes the coverage of learners and trainees who have hearing impairment, visual impairment, deaf, blindness, physical impairment, intellectual disabilities, specific learning difficulties or disabilities, cerebral palsy, speech and language difficulties, multiple disabilities, autism, and albinism. You see, all these are covered in the policy. So nobody should wake up and start abusing another one, either in parliament or in the streets. The policy covers everybody. And you will realize that when it comes to those with health impairments, the policy also covers them. It covers those with gifted and talentedness. You remember those children who they may not have the intellectual capacity, but they're very good. They're very good in music. They're very good in art and craft. They're very good in extracurricular activities. Those are gifted and talentedness. The intellect may not be very strong, but when it comes to the gifts, they can sing, they can give poems. The policy recognizes all those people. So there are 4 objectives there we want to look at. Align education training service for learners and trainees with disabilities with the relevant national policy framework. Develop a clear policy framework for the provision of inclusive education and training when they move from primary to second. That's why the government talks about 100% transition. We're not talking about this one must move, this one should not move. It is 100% transition, and the government is very, very passionate about that. You saw that from the Form 1 admission the other day. The government is the ministry is ensuring that no child is left at home. Even those who are vulnerable, our girls who went home during COVID and they became pregnant and they are given birth, we want them back to school. That's the policy of the government. People may say, why? Why are you wasting your resources on that? But as the government, we're saying those are our children, and no child should be left behind when it comes to giving quality education. Number two, develop clear policy framework for the provision of inclusive education training. And three, address the existing policy and implementation gaps in the provision of education and training for learners and trainees with disabilities. Then finally, develop guidelines for the implementations. Any policy must have implementation guidelines, and the government is very clear on the sector policy on learners and trainees with disabilities. Of course, again, to achieve these objectives, the policy has identified 16 thematic areas. That's very key for us. Policy provisions, and develop a total of 17 policy statements. As you come up with a policy provision, there has to be a policy provision. How do we implement that? We may not go in detail of that, of all that. You get yourself, grab yourself a copy of the policy from the website. It is in the ministry website. Just type sector policy for learners and training special needs. You can download one for you. You can get a hard copy from the ministry. It is there for us. So let's look at the thematic areas. You can see this policy is very key. One of the main thematic area is inclusive education. Inclusivity. Just as I said, are we including our children in classes? Even when the government was releasing the result, you remember how it was very passionate. These are the people who have gotten A's, and those who also have gotten A's with the special needs are these ones. Assessment and early intervention is very key. It is also in competence-based, that we have education assessment and then from there placement. Access to quality and relevant education and training. Is the type of education I'm providing in the school, is it quality? Is it relevant? When you are starting a course, is it quality? Is it relevant to achieving the government Vision 2030? Quality learning environment. The environment has to be disability friendly. Do we have a place where the person on the wheelchair can just get in your school or get into the compound? Or we say, this is a go-no zone for you. Then we're talking about specialized learning resources, assistive devices and technology. And remember what the government is talking about, digital literacy program. That's where it can put in the content in technology so that you can just access it. Even those with the visual impairment, those with disabilities can access the content when it is put in those kind of softwares. Capacity building and human resource development, of course, as I said earlier, that's what KISA does. Training teachers, competence on how do you teach a child with autism. For those parents who understand what autism is, because that is my area of expertise, is that child can hardly sit for even a second. How are you going to make sure the child has the attention span is sustained? So that those that do, when you say child with those, you may run away because you don't understand why is the child restless? Why is he doing like this? There's a number of challenges the parents go, but the government has put in a mechanism, and one of it is building capacity on human resource. That's what the government does, training of teachers. Public participation and engagement. Again, you're not going to do anything without public participation. It shall move, then come back and say, no, there was no public participation on this. So it goes back to the drawing board. Advocacy and awareness creation, that's part of what we're doing here, to let the parents know and stakeholders know that the people, persons with disabilities have rights and privileges. And nobody should step on their privileges because the law protects them very well. There's curriculum, equity and gender mainstreaming. Curriculum, that's why there's curriculum reforms in this country. Now we're moving towards CBC. We are moving forward, and we are not going to look back, despite the setbacks that are here and there, but the government is trying its best to ensure that CBC moves forward. Financing and sustainability, partnership, collaboration, and coordination. That is the key thing. You cannot work alone. The government can't achieve it alone. The private sector can't do it alone. We need to work as partnerships and collaborators and coordinate together. Research and data management and innovation is very key. You cannot provide services if you don't have data. How many children with physical impairments? How many children with autism? How many children with hearing impairment? We must have data. And the government is the custodian of data in the Directorate of Special Needs Education in the Ministry of Education. Inclusive disaster risk reduction has to be emphasized. Then mentorship, molding and nurturing of the national values. Then institutional implementation framework for the sector policy. Those are all what we call the 16 thematic areas, and they're well elaborated going forward. Then quickly we shall talk about what we call policy legal framework, all the way from the United Nations Convention for Human Rights, 1948, Article 23, 28, and 29, and then we moved down to the Salamanca Statement that is, very popular in the education sector, in the NGO world, in terms of action for special needs education, 1994. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons, that's UNCRPT, that is very important and very common, 2006, that promotes and protects the rights of every person with a disability. There are laws from international down to national level. And again, we're also saying that Kenya has ratified the UN Agenda 2030 as articulated in SDGs. The Constitution of Kenya guarantees that people with any kind of disability access appropriate education and training, and that all schools are able to include them. Listen, all schools. Then are you prepared for that inclusivity? Have you trained your teachers for Kenya Sign Language? Have you trained your teachers? Have you capacity built? When we come to your office, is there a receptionist who can sign for us if a client comes who needs sign language interpretation? Now, Vision 2030 commits the government to develop human capital regardless of status and disability. And again, that is, when you see the construction of roads, the flying everywhere, the government is trying to achieve Vision 2030. Then moving forward, we want to talk about the laws governing special needs in Kenya. It's well articulated, and we have the Children's Act. The child has a right to a name, a right to education, and right to eat. So that's why we say if the government allocates money to special schools, we expect those children to be fed. We expect the resources to be utilized well for the sake of that child who does not have a voice. If when you are setting up an NGO, ladies and gentlemen, let it not be it is for your own benefit. It is for the benefit of that child with disability. That you said you are setting up a unit for them. What are the conditions? What if you walked into those schools or into those places you have set up to support children with special needs and disabilities? What is the state? The onus is on us to ensure that we provide quality services. Number two, the Person with Disability Act 2003. And remember, this one has been amended by what we call PWD's Amendment Bill of 2019. So when you are reading this one, read it in cognizance, or together with what has been amended in 2019.